Florida gun owners woke up to a nightmare they never saw coming. And the fallout is absolutely insane. The state just mandated something so shocking that even sheriffs are refusing to enforce it, leaving millions of legal gun owners trapped in a legal minefield. I'm breaking down exactly what this mandatory requirement is, why law enforcement is an open rebellion, and what it means for your Second Amendment rights. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button right now because gun laws are changing faster than ever, and you need to stay ahead of this chaos. Music: the hidden shelf life conspiracy the mandatory requirement revealed. Florida just dropped a bombshell that's turning the gun community upside down. Starting October 15th, every single gun owner in the state must register their firearms with a new state database system. And this isn't optional anymore. We're talking about a complete reversal of what Florida has stood for over the past 3 decades. The state that gave Americans permitless carry just 2 years ago is now requiring you to submit serial numbers, make and model information, and even proof of purchase for every firearm you own. If you bought guns privately or inherited them from family, you'll need to provide sworn affidavit explaining how you acquired them. The registration fee is $47 per firearm. And if you own 5 guns, that's $235 out of your pocket just to stay legal. Failure to register by the deadline results in a secondary misdemeanor, which carries up to 60 days in jail and a $500 fine. This misdemeanor conviction can strip away your right to own firearms in other states that have stricter requirements. What started as a simple registration has now become a potential pathway to losing your Second Amendment rights entirely. Gun owners across the state are flooding county offices trying to figure out if this is even real. And the phone lines have been jammed for weeks at the Sheriff Rebellion. 23 sheriffs across Florida have publicly announced they will not enforce this mandatory registration. And that number keeps growing every single day. Sheriff Wayne the Markup Multiplication Scam Ivy from Brevard County went on record saying his department considers this mandate a direct violation of the Second Amendment, and they won't be participating in any enforcement actions. Liberty County Sheriff Nick Finch took it even further, stating that any state official who tries to enforce this law in his jurisdiction will be met with resistance from his deputies. Polk County, with a population of over 750,000 people, has joined the rebellion. Miami-Dade County, the most populated county in Florida with 2.7 million residents, remains silent on their enforcement position, leaving gun owners in that area completely in the dark. The problem is that Florida has 67 counties total, which means 44 counties are either enforcing this or haven't made their position clear. Gun owners living on county borders are facing an impossible situation. You could be legal driving down one side of the street and committing a crime on the other side, depending on which sheriff's jurisdiction you're in. The registration nightmare. The state's online registration portal crashed within 4 hours of going live, and it stayed down for 6 days straight. When it finally came back online, gun owners discovered the system was rejecting serial numbers that contained certain letters, claiming they were invalid entries. Firearms manufactured before 1968 often have serial numbers that don't follow modern conventions, and the system simply won't accept them. One gun owner in Jacksonville spent 3 hours on hold trying to register his grandfather's the caliber conversion cash drain 1952 Winchester rifle, only to be told he needs to bring it to a state-approved gunsmith to have it re-serialized at his own expense. That process costs between $150 and $300 per firearm, depending on where you go. The state database also requires a current photograph of each firearm, which means you can't just submit registration paperwork. You need to take clear, well-lit photos showing the serial number and overall condition. A collector in Tampa who owns 47 firearms calculated that compliance would cost him over $2,200 in fees alone, not counting the time investment or potential gunsmith costs. You're required to indicate whether firearms are stored in a safe gun cabinet or other secure location at your primary residence. Duct the data breach risk. Florida's government databases have been compromised 4 times in the last 7 years. And now they want to create a centralized registry of every gun owner and exactly what they own. In 2019, The Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles suffered a breach that exposed the personal information of 8.6 million drivers. 2 years later, the unemployment system was hacked during the pandemic response, compromising Social Security numbers and banking details for 1.2 million residents. The state's response to these breaches has been offering free credit monitoring, which does absolutely nothing if criminals know your name, address, and detailed inventory of the firearms in your home. Criminals could target homes based on the number and type of firearms registered. And there's already evidence this happens in states the temperature storage money pit with similar systems. California's database has been subpoenaed 37 times by attorneys in civil litigation cases, meaning your firearms information could become part of public court records if you're ever involved in any lawsuit, even one completely unrelated to firearms. The constitutional challenge. The Second Amendment Foundation filed a lawsuit in federal court exactly 9 days after this mandate was announced. And they're not alone. Florida Carry Incorporated, Gun Owners of America, and the Firearms Policy Coalition have all joined with separate legal challenges targeting different aspects of the law. The core argument is simple but powerful. The Supreme Court ruled in District of Columbia versus Heller that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms, and requiring registration before you can exercise that right is the same as requiring a permit before you can speak freely. Imagine needing government permission and paying fees to post on social media or attend a protest. Legal scholars are pointing to a lesser-known case from 1968 called Hannes versus United States, where the Supreme Court actually ruled that forcing someone to register a firearm could violate Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. The court found that requiring registration created a situation where compliance with the law could provide evidence of illegal possession. Florida's mandate has the same problem. But nobody in the state legislature apparently read that case before drafting this law, the compliance trap. Gun owners who register their firearms are creating a paper trail that could haunt them for decades. And those who don't register are risking the humidity destruction you can't see criminal charges. This is the definition of a no-win situation. If you comply and register everything, you're admitting under penalty of perjury that you own specific firearms at specific locations. If any of those firearms are later used in a crime because they were stolen, or if you sell one privately and forget to update the registry, you could face charges for filing false information. The law requires you to update your registration within 10 days of any change in ownership or storage location. Forget to file that update when you move houses, and you're technically in violation. On the other hand, if you refuse to register and your county is actually enforcing this mandate, you're committing a crime just by owning an unregistered firearm. Traffic stops become a potential felony investigation if the officer runs your name and discovers you haven't registered. The slippery slope. Registration has always been the first step toward confiscation, and history proves this pattern repeats itself over and over. New York passed the SAFE Act in 2013, requiring registration of certain rifles, and within 5 years, they began sending confiscation letters to gun owners who registered during that initial period. California has used their registry to reclassify firearms multiple times, suddenly making previously legal guns illegal and demanding owners either surrender them or face felony charges. Canada implemented long gun registration in 1995, promising it would never lead to confiscation. Then in 2020, they banned over 1,500 models of firearms and used those registration records to track down owners for mandatory buybacks. The real agenda. This mandatory registration came out of nowhere with almost no public debate. And that should tell you everything you need to know about what's really happening. The bill was introduced on a Friday afternoon, passed through committee on Monday, hit the floor on Wednesday, and was signed into law by Thursday evening. That's a 5-day turnaround for legislation that fundamentally changes gun ownership in the third most populous state in America. No testimony was taken from gun rights organizations or constitutional experts. The usual process of debate and amendment was completely bypassed using an emergency provision that's supposed to be reserved for natural disasters and immediate threats to public safety. This is the fight for the Second Amendment happening right now. And staying silent means watching your rights disappear one registration form at a time. Drop a comment below telling me if your state should resist this kind of overreach, or if you think Florida gun owners should just comply and hope for the best. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because these laws are spreading faster than anyone expected. I'll see you in the next one.